Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and I have weird toys for you today. Sometimes it's just something fun that I can do, and here is the amazing thing that my weird new toy does. Observe. I turn on these pair of things, and sounds pretty similar, huh? Check out what it does with only the encode. Yep, I have uLaw encoding and decoding. Now here's what you can do with this. The idea for this was to try to give some toolbox plugins where if you're doing something like a bitcrusher, for instance, let's bring up DeRez, the most basic sorts of bitcrusher. Also, this has gain and dry wet, but you probably shouldn't touch them. It really needs to kind of work the same way. It's the only reason those are there is because if you're doing weird, crazy experiments, maybe they'll come in handy. They default to 1. You should leave them at 1 if you're using it for something like this. So here we have DeRez. And that is bit crushing. And that's super low bit. But what bit crushing does is forces signals to go to one of these threshold levels. What uLaw does is it squishes all of the signal right up to the extremes for encoding in something like this, and then unsquishes it again so that the noise and stuff in your transmission gets removed. It gets taken down to be very quiet again. Now, here's the thing. Check this out. We now have an old school digital, as in not PCM digital, as in old-fashioned converters and analog to digital, digital to analog converters. DeRez is still doing its thing, but the uLaw encode and decode are changing the whole behavior of it so that the res is no longer this blasting wall of just instead, you're encoding it. What that's doing is it's giving you essentially more bits down at the quiet area, and then as it gets louder and louder, it goes progressively coarser. All the bits are clustered towards the center, and then as the waveform gets bigger, you have less granularity as sounds get louder. And I can demonstrate that also on something which is less noisy. This is something, anything. And again, compare it to that kind of res. And we're using the same number of bits to encode and decode. That's why uLaw is an interesting technique. I can also fool with it like this. I can dial back some of the res. Till it's kind of raspy. Now you can hear some of the detail and some of the energy on the... Well, you know, I have an even better demonstration than that. And it's not Alien Kittens this time, don't worry. The plain old drum kit recording, just a couple of microphones up and no compression on this guy. So, sounds like that. If you use DeRez, then oh my, you get a lot of... See, one of the things that does is it's got a transition point on one of these between bits transitions, and one of those is 0. So if you're doing normal DeRez without any kind of offset, you can do a tiny DC offset to minimize that. You're going to get a huge roaring sound out of the subtleties of the noise. But then check out what happens with uLaw. We're starting to hear a very old school sampler thing going on. Where we have that noise floor being dragged up by the DeRez, but uLaw is stopping it from being so overwhelming. And you know, one thing we can also do is this is what you do if you need to make it not do that. DC voltage. Be careful playing with this toy. If you have subwoofers of some kind, they're DC coupled, you could hurt yourself this way, or you could hurt your speakers this way. But it is a tool, nothing more. Here's our uLaw decode. Here's DeRez again. And there's the DC voltage. Now first we'll turn these things off. Watch this. What that's doing is adding a DC voltage and then using DeRez to quantize it so that we're getting a gatey effect. Now, if I turn on uLaw, it's actually making that DC voltage stuff go much quieter. It's still doing the same thing. We can hear it. Like that's the on DC voltage, and then unless I put a filter on the output, the DC voltage will be there in the end of the mix too, but I'm just demonstrating it right now. We'll make it really, really small, and now what we've got here is a seemingly very clean bit crush. You're not hearing a lot of roaring going on, but the loudness part of the sounds are still having an effect. What we're doing here is specifically setting it up so that using uLaw, we're keeping a lot of the quiet details in there, so the background is not roaring and quantized. But then the loud noises are considerably more quantized. And I'll go on and off with it a little bit. Off. on. And a little more obvious. And a little more gated. We'll turn DC voltage off for fun. Off. See how that works? So this is a tool to give things kind of the aura of old school digital, really old digital with unusual arrangements. Like this will work also for reverbs and things. Let me bring one up, in fact. We'll make DeRez go away for a second. And let's pull that out. What would be good? There's a lot of different things that you could use. There's a lot of plugins in this list. If you use these plugins, please join my Patreon. If there's one of them in here that you would buy at $50 a pop, then please jump on at the $50 a year level. And if I've done something else by next year, hey, you could continue. But let me see firstly, where is my reverbs? I didn't spatialize. I know I've got them. I've just got so much stuff in here. Nonlinear space, there we go. So this should be interesting. In fact, I've never tried this before, so we don't know just how interesting it might be. We'll find out, won't we? Because one of the things that goes on here is that doing this encode and decode has huge, strange effects on anything that's not simply passing the signal through. It's very much like using a console plugin, but way more so. So for fun, let's see what happens. Strange, terrible things, that's what happens. I'll show you why. I was going to be using this to demonstrate what a cheap old digital reverb would do, but it seems like we don't quite have that. Instead, let's demonstrate something even stranger. We're going to use Apple plugins. EQ, channel EQ. Boop. Now that's very normal, I suppose. Takes up a lot of space. Mine take up less space. That's just how that works. And if we don't have anything going on here, it's acting exactly like it wasn't there at all. But if I boost, you get a kind of dirty EQ going on. Or a crunchy, aggressive, nasty EQ. In fact, let's have even more fun and play with a guitar sound. That's very loud. We're going to make bit shift gain go real quiet on this because now if I turn off the encode and decode, here's my EQ. And you get this really funky, nasty edge going on. And it's crazier and crazier the tighter the EQ thing is. Like with the Q being really tight. Or you can duck using a cut. And it'll still be weird. And then if we're going to continue to get strange, you can do other things on top of that. Anything you put in between these will go kind of weird. It has to be really untouched for you to get away with normal behavior. Let's see what I've got. Well, something like fracture is way too intense. How about something funky like a chorus? That sounds fairly normal, right? And with no uLaw, you can have this really seasick chorus. This is my chorus. But it goes really sick using the uLaw. And you'd have to pull the dry wet down in order to get it to behave itself. See, that's normal, and it takes so little to get weird. uLaw is a really extreme effect. Pretty much anything that you do, similar to console, but hundreds of times more powerful. Anything that you do that takes the waveform and shifts it or changes it, if you encode it with uLaw and expand it outwards to the very widest ranges of everything, and then squish it back down again afterwards with the decode to make the noise go away and concentrate all of the quantized places, if you were using quantized places, which we're not in chorus, down to the center, any effect that you've got will also be switched down to the center. And I can demonstrate that with even crazier plugins. I think I mentioned Fracture and said, oh, that's terrible, we can't demonstrate that because it's just too weird. So let's do the just too weird. See, if you encode, it just goes completely nuts. But here's an interesting thing. With Fracture, we've got this drive control going on, and we've got a way for it to kind of wrap around. Like instead of going to a distortion like this and just stopping, what it'll do is it'll go back around again. And it's essentially Fracture is, I'm trying to think of the term for these things. There's a Eurorack module type that this is. It's a wave folder. Fracture is a wave folder. So what it does is terrible things. Since it fries everything out and makes it so bright and fills up saturation intensely, if you put uLaw decode on the end of that, which I have never done before until now, here's what Fracture does into uLaw decode. So that's pretty messed up. Let's see, do we have anything else? I think maybe we do. I'm looking for a particular thing, but I might be able to find it here. I have another mode of doing this, but I think it only works on the old laptop. However, I can try doctoring this and we'll see what the uLaw encoding does there. Now, if we were using console on the pitch shifter, console would be trying to take the artifacts of the pitch shifter and sort of chill them out. It's a resynthesis of the sound, but it would be acting as if it was trying to treat the resynthesis of the sound as a mix. But if we engage uLaw, you start seeing all kinds of funny artifacts and things going on. Like, I think I can hear the crossfade better. That's because it's doing pitch tracking. So that's a bit of a nasty sound, but if we didn't have uLaw going on, it'd sound like this. And we're still getting a lot of the noises here, but turn on uLaw and we get an interesting change in the tone. And as long as we're being thoroughly silly, let's play with a voice recording as long as we've got things turned down so it doesn't hurt.
So that's the purpose of having the... I got a bit of a delay going on here. And the delay will make me scream. And the idea of this plugin that I'm demonstrating for you is it's called a quick voice clip.
And it's for dealing with those moments when you may be doing a let's play or something like that, and you gotta throw a plug-in on your video mixdown.
Because the guy who was recording it was getting really loud. And stuff like that.
Okay, I think maybe I've had enough fun with this for the moment. I'm trying things I've never tried with uLaw, and I think that you'll be able to do the same thing if you have it, and you do have it, because here it is. You might want to avoid fooling with weird stuff or stuff that's doctoring the sound. Like I just introduced Buttercomp 2 last week. And the thing is, if you try to do a compressor on uLaw, the results are faintly horrifying, I think, because I've never tried this before. Let's find out. Or not? Why is that happening? This is a very smooth compressor. One thing about it is having an extraordinarily intense effect, because the thing about uLaw is that it is clipping stuff. I guess I'm not quite done yet. How about bitclitter? Really, I think it wants to deal mostly with quantizing. Anything else that you do as far as like filtering or heaven help you delays and EQs and things is at your own risk. So that's a kind of harsh, edgy sound. And it's really bringing out some of the weird digitally qualities. Okay, that has some character. Sounds like there's an old modem stuck in there somewhere. And without it, it does still do something, but it's much less obvious. So, uLaw, very powerful effect, perhaps rather hard to predict, and very intense and odd. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else weird that I can do before I'm done. Oh, I know. Grooveware. Bet you didn't know what it sounded like to do uLaw Grooveware. I don't know either, because I've never tried it before, but let's find out together. Grooveware sounds kind of like this. Remember, this is not crunchy Grooveware. This is just regular Grooveware. And what it's doing is it's behaving a little bit like Aura. Oh my god, I should try Aura. Let's try Grooveware first. Oh wow, okay. That's intense. Now it's crunchy without even being crunchy Grooveware. Because what we're doing is we're doing the uLaw encode, expanding the waveform up to this very boosted thing, applying Grooveware, and then shrinking it back down again, as if nothing was being added. So all the changes become incredibly loud. And I can use the dry wet to dial it back. Let's grab Aura. I want to see what Aura does. There's Aura. Wow. Okay, that's a super loud thing. What happens if I start turning down uLaw decode here? Using my trim there. What's happening is a kind of hyper insano exaggeration of what Aura was doing. I can also use this to be a sort of insane expander. Because at 1, they are calibrated to work with each other. And of course, we can always just plain use uLaw encode all by its little self. As a kind of insane overloading distortion. There you go. You have a new overdrive too. And on that bombshell, I will leave you with your new plugins. uLaw encode and uLaw decode. And with some things, I do the plugins and I go, I hope you don't use this for terrible things. Well, these are kind of different. I hope you use this for terrible, terrible things. This is a tool that you might not have had before, and I don't think there's really a wrong way to use it. Go nuts and have fun with this thing. I know some people are going to get some use out of it. I've demonstrated what you need to do in order to have it fairly well behave, and I've also demonstrated a whole bunch of ways to do genuinely horrible noises that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So this was a good day at work. Hope you like uLaw encode, and thank you very much.